Hello, this is Mr. Barn in geometry, and we're going to be going over expressions this week. I wanted to do a quick overview on what's going to be happening this week. We are going to be doing Savas Realize on Wednesday. You have a discussion post due by Friday, and you have a syllabus to return by Friday. Other than that, I think we're going to be doing a pre-test probably Thursday. That's to determine where we're going to start next week. I just want to see what you all know and what you might need to work on. But in this video, we're going to work on expressions. It's a very basic algebra topic, but we need some review since we haven't been in school since March. So I'm going to start with some basic terms, and then we're going to move on to expressions. So let's begin with that. Okay, so first we need to define a few things. The word product. Can we remember what the word product means? The word product basically just means multiply. When you're asked what is the product of 2 and 4, you would just multiply 2 times 4. So the product of 2 and 4 would be 8. Next we have quotient. If product means multiply, quotient is going to mean divide. So if you want the quotient of 24 and 6, it would be 4. 24 divided by 6 is 4. So quotient just means to divide. Okay. What about another one that's easy? How about sum? Sum means addition. Right? Sum means addition. Then we also have difference. That is subtraction. These are your 4 basic operations. These are the 4 terms you're going to need to remember. Product, quotient, sum, and difference. Without the knowledge of knowing these words, you will not be successful in algebra. So, now that we know that, there's one other term that I want to remind you all of, and that would be variable. Hopefully we remember what variable means from last year. But a variable is an object, a letter, or basically anything that represents an unknown value. That is what we use in algebra, such as x. So it represents an unknown value. Okay? So variables like x, y, z, triangle, any of those. You know what we're going to start with, the reason I wanted to start with these terms is so we could look at some stuff here. So basically I want to teach you the very beginning of algebra. So in elementary school, they're going to give you a problem like 7 plus 1 equals blank. I'm sure you all remember doing a bunch of these. You can also do multiplication tables this way. 7 plus 1 equals blank, that is an algebraic equation because it's the same thing as 7 plus 1 equals x, a variable. So this blank here is a variable, just like this x is a variable. It represents an unknown quantity. I could even say 7 plus 1 equals Mr. Barnett. It doesn't matter what you choose, okay? They're all going to have the same answer. 7 plus 1 obviously equals 8. So in all 3 of these, x would equal 8, and Mr. Barnett would equal 8. It's basic algebra, okay? So that's how algebra gets started. You've learned it from a very young age, but they do not define it as algebra until you get older. Now we want to talk about the difference between expressions and equations. So the difference between expressions and equations. Okay? The easiest way to remember this is equation has the EQ in it. Equations have equal signs. Okay, so an equation, an example of an equation would be like 2x plus 1 equals 5. Okay, an expression cannot be solved. It does not have an equal sign, so it's something like x plus 2, where x could be anything. It could be anything from 0 to 100 to 1,000, but an equation, it can only be a certain finite number of numbers. So in this example, you would know 2 times a number plus 1 equals 5. What would that number be? Logically, you can think of it as saying 2 times a number plus 1 equals 5. So 2 times what number plus 1 would be 5? 2, right? 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 would be 5. That's the way to do it logically in your head. To do it algebraically, it's a two-step equation. You subtract 1 on both sides, like so. 1 minus 1 would be 0, and 5 minus 1 would be 4. So you'd have 2x equals 4, and then you would divide by 2. X would equal 4 divided by 2 is 2. That's a two-step equation. It's something you should have worked on last year, something we might not remember, but we're going to get to that. Now, I just want you to know the difference between an equation and an expression. Now, why are expressions important, and why did I show you the vocabulary terms from earlier? Why are these words here important? Because in the first lesson for expressions, you're going to be asked to write an expression given some information. So what if I said, write an expression that shows the product of x and 9. It's a product. We need to read this. Write an expression that shows the product of x and 9. So first we're going to look for some clues. We know we have an x, that's the variable. We know we have a 9, that's a number. And we're looking for a product. So we go back to our handy dandy vocabulary here. Product means multiply. So what we want to do is show the multiplication of x and 9. So that would simply be 9 times x. Or in algebra, we would just write 9x. Now here's a quick moment I want to remind you all that you can no longer write things like this, 2 times 3. Okay, the x can no longer be used because you would be writing something like 9xx, and that doesn't make any sense, right? So you cannot use that. We're not using the x anymore. You can use a dot, or you're going to write it just like that. Okay, let's try another one. Right, an expression that shows 7 added to a number n. Okay, an expression that shows 7 added to a number n. N would be the variable, right? N represents any number. And we're wanting to add 7 to that number. So how would we write that? Well, we would start with what we have, the number n. So we're going to write n. N's our variable. And we just want to write an expression that shows 7 added to that number. So you're going to add 7. N plus 7, right? Pretty straightforward. Now, we have to be able to pull this information out of a paragraph or sentence and write an expression. That's the whole point of this exercise. So let's keep going. What if I wrote the sum of a number and 4? Okay, the sum of a number and 4. So if we go back to our vocabulary, sum means addition. So we know that this is going to be addition, right? So the sum of a number and 4. So a number would be an unknown value. So that is what our variable is going to be. So we need to pick a variable. In algebra, the most common variable would be x. Okay, so there's our variable, and we want to find the sum of that variable in fourths. Just be x plus 4. That is an expression to represent that statement. Okay, so that's basically it for this lesson. We're just learning how to use those vocabulary terms we put on there to be able to pull out an expression given some words. And we need to remember a few key things. You need to remember the vocabulary, and you need to remember the difference between an expression and an equation. So that's what we're going to do for this week. We're going to work on expressions, and I'll probably post a follow-up video later on. So I hope you all have a good first week back, and I appreciate you watching the video.